Hey y'all, Matt here today from the beach, and today I want to talk to you about the Gospel of Luke. It's taken us this long, but we're finally getting to the third book of the Gospels. If you want to see the first two on Matthew and Mark, just go back in the playlist on the Gospels and you'll find them on my channel. But Luke is probably, well, it's the last of the Synoptic Gospels that we've talked about. But it's also unique in that it is actually a 2-volume work. And what I mean by 2-volume is Luke and then the book of Acts are actually meant to be one long book. And originally it would have been written that way. And the reason why we see it separated, the same reason as like 1st and 2nd Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Kings, is because of the length of the scrolls back in that time. You know, they would write on a papyrus scroll. And a lot of these scrolls were up to 35 feet long. And Luke and Acts together would have taken up all of that. And can you imagine trying to unroll a 35-foot scroll and reading it? As far as the author of Luke, we all know that Luke wrote it. It's attributed to Luke now. But Luke wasn't named in the work, just like Matthew and Mark. That was the common practice for the author to not write at the top, you know, authored by Luke, or, you know, some kind of a introduction that says, Luke wrote this letter. But that wasn't abnormal back then. We know that Luke wrote the book because it's the same author that wrote Acts, for one. And number two, the early church affirms that Luke is the author. So what do we know about Luke? Luke is this like strange individual that just pops up. We know he's not one of the 12 disciples. We know he's not an apostle of Christ. In chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, we see that he actually gathered witness testimony to comprise this book. And he was probably a Gentile medical doctor. So he's not one of the apostles. He's not even a Jew, but he's just a Gentile medical doctor. We know that from the book of Acts that he walked very closely with the apostle Paul. In chapter 16 of Acts, we actually start seeing Luke refer to us, like, you know, denoting that he traveled with Paul, that they traveled together. We also think that Mark maybe could have been a source because Luke knew Mark and was aware of Mark, and they were on the same place on occasion. We see that in Colossians chapter 4, verse 10, 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 11, Philemon, verse 24. So Luke is our author. He's a medical doctor, and he comprised all this information based off of an investigation that he made into basically who was Jesus. He wanted to define who Jesus was specifically. He didn't follow Jesus. He wasn't a disciple of Jesus, but he comprised all this information through careful research to put together this book about Jesus. As far as the date, a lot of people now, as we talked about in the previous videos and in the Synoptic Gospel video, a lot of people believe that Markan priority exists, that Mark basically wrote first, and that Luke and Matthew both used Mark's work as a source for some of their information. So that's something that we take into consideration. Obviously, if that's true, and you believe that's true, he would have had to have written after Mark. Luke chapter 21 predicts the temple fall being destroyed. You know, Jesus predicted the fall of the temple, and that actually happened in 70 AD, and it's referred to as a future event. So we believe for this reason that Luke was written before 70 AD. And then as we see the book of Acts close, we actually see most of these events, like Paul being imprisoned and stuff like that, we know they actually occurred in AD 62 or AD 63. So that gives us a time frame as well for when the end of the book of Acts, which also is the end of Luke, since it's one long work. That gives us a time frame for when Luke was written too, because Luke obviously had to be written before Acts if Luke is the first part of Acts. Hopefully that makes sense. So for these reasons, most scholars today believe that Luke was written in the mid-60s AD, so about 30 years after the death of Jesus. That varies a little bit depending on who you're talking to, but for the most part, that's the scholarly consensus. So what's the purpose of Luke? Why do we have this third perspective on the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus? one purpose is that he's not offering a witness testimony alone, but it's a carefully researched presentation of the personal life and death of Jesus by a Gentile medical doctor. This isn't somebody that was a disciple of Jesus. He's offering his research, very careful research, basically to answer the question for people, Gentiles specifically, who is this Jesus guy? What really happened with Jesus? And if they read Luke's work of Luke and Acts, then they would very quickly see who Jesus was and then how the church started in Acts. In chapter 1, verses 3 and 4, we see part of the purpose is to strengthen the faith of believers and to challenge misconceptions of unbelievers, especially those of the Gentiles. This work, because Luke's background as a medical doctor, it's researched and it's very clear. There's not a lot of Old Testament references. There's not a lot of stuff that would imply that they would have a Jewish background or anything like that. So it would have been easy for anybody to pick up and read, especially the Roman and, the lay person that wasn't familiar with these scriptures. And lastly, what we see in Luke is we see a balanced portrait of Jesus, emphasizing his divinity and his humanity. So in answering this question of who Jesus was, Luke gives us the answer very clearly that Jesus was both divine as the God incarnate, as the God in a human body walking the earth, and he was also fully man. He felt compassion, he felt hunger, he felt these things. He was truly a man, and these things are vital to our theology of Jesus. We all know that without the life, the sinless life, the sacrificial death of Jesus on the cross, and the resurrection of Jesus by God, we wouldn't have salvation. The Apostle Paul tells us that without the resurrection, we have nothing. And Luke sets out and does an excellent job of answering these questions and painting a portrait for us of who Jesus is. But I love you guys. I hope you like this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notify bell below so you can get a notification when I post again. And I will see y'all on the next one. I love you guys. Blessings.